Well, it's that time of year again. Everyone is making resolutions. And the instant that they hit a hiccup, they're going to give up here in about a week or two. And the reason why they're going to give up is because there's no plan. I'm going to stop doing this, whatever it is. Lying, cheating, stealing. Or I'm going to start doing this, Bible, exercise, or whatever. But how? Greg Reed once said this, and I think it's going to be on the screen. I think it's worth repeating. A dream written down with a date becomes a goal. So a dream is, I'm going to read through the Bible. A goal is, I'm going to read through the Bible by the end of the year. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. I'm going to read through the Bible by the end of the year by following a reading plan. By doing those daily things, I'm going to read the Bible by the end of the year. A plan backed by action makes your dreams come true. This is why you're going to fail. Because you're going to say, I'm going to do this, and you're not going to change anything in your life. I'm going to start reading through the Bible. How? What are you going to give up in your schedule? And so this is how you're going to succeed. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to read the Bible. That's my dream. By the end of the year, that's my goal. My plan is to do it in these daily reading steps. And my action is this. I normally watch TV from 6 to 7. I'm going to stop watching TV from 6 to 7 so I can read the Bible from 6 to 7. And then I'll be able to fulfill what I am setting out to do. It has to be backed by some action. And we're the masters of tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll seek God when I'm older. I'll read the Bible through when I've got more time, when I don't have such a stressful job, when this or that happens. But those situations never come. And so we just kind of drag it out. And we always tell ourselves, tomorrow, but today is the day of salvation. Today is the day to do something. If you want to read the Bible, today is it. Don't wait for some golden opportunity. Now is the time. So this year we're looking at the series that what we're looking at is called Give God the Year. And with that, we're going to look at 3 traits to focus on during the year. And the first one is discipline. Now, I'm going to ask a question. I want you guys to be totally honest. When you read the Bible, who blows as quickly as possible through the genealogies? The genealogies are like, this person was the son of this person, was the son of this person. You read it as fast as you can to get it out of the way, right? Okay, now, be honest. I won't judge you, I swear, but I just be honest here. Who skips them entirely? You get to them and you say, you know what? Forget it. Forget it. Like, I'll read the main highlights, but I'm skipping the whole family line thing. I mean, right? So I saw quite a few hands on both of those. And, you know, here's the thing, the funny thing, the ironic thing, is that it takes a lot of discipline to read through all those names. Which is funny because we're actually talking about discipline today, but not in that aspect. So the genealogies, although they're usually ignored, here's the thing about them, okay? They serve a very important purpose. Very important purpose. And they're connected to the stories around them. I know that doesn't make sense, but it's true. They really are connected to the stories around them. Today we're going to look at the genealogy recorded in Genesis chapter 5, which is the genealogy of Adam and Seth down to Noah. And that's all we're looking at. So I promise you there's something here, okay? Just hold on. We're going to start in verse 3, just because it just to show you the flow. Nothing's wrong with verses 1 or 2. Adam was 130 years old when he fathered a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. Now that's important because Adam was formed in the likeness of God. So it's saying that there's a progression going on here. Okay, and named him Seth. Adam lived 800 years after he fathered Seth, and he fathered other sons and daughters. Oops. So Adam's life lasted 930 years, and then he died. Now you're going to follow this exact same pattern over and over and over again, okay? So let's go through. Seth was 105 years old when he fathered Enosh. Seth lived 807 years after he fathered Enosh, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Seth's life lasted 912 years. Then he died. Not too shabby, 912 years, all right. Enosh was 90 years old when he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived 815 years after he fathered Kenan, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Enosh's life lasted 905 years. Then he died. Kenan was 70 years old when he fathered Mahalalel. Kenan lived 840 years after he fathered Mahalalel, and he fathered other sons and daughters. And then you guessed it, Kenan's life lasted 910 years, then he died. But hold on, we're not done yet, okay? But you've made it quite a bit. So if you want to get up and exercise, I understand. Mahalalel was 65 years old when he fathered Jared. Mahalalel lived, boy, see that 3 times really fast. Mahalalel lived 830 years after he fathered Jared, and he fathered other sons and daughters. See, all those people who you tried to skip it, it's come back to haunt you now. So Mahalalel's life lasted 895 years, then he died. Jared was 862 years when he fathered Enoch. Jared lived 800 years. He fathered Enoch, and he fathered other sons and daughters, and then he died after 962 years. Enoch was 65 years old. Now we see a break in the pattern. Enoch was 65 years old when he fathered Methuselah. And after he fathered Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and fathered other sons and daughters. So now he's going to die, right? So Enoch's life lasted 365 years, substantially shorter. Enoch walked with God, then he was not there because God took him. Methuselah was 187 years old when he fathered Lamech. And Methuselah lived 702. Did I skip something? Methuselah lived 782 years after he fathered Lamech, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Methuselah's life lasted 969 years, then he died, the oldest living person in the Bible. Lamech was 182 years old when he fathered a son, and he named him Noah, saying, "This one will bring us relief from the agonizing labor of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." Lamech lived 595 years after he fathered Noah, and he fathered other sons and daughters. So Lamech's life lasted 777 years, then he died. And it doesn't say about how old Noah was when he died until he gets to chapter, it's 8 or something like that. So, we made it through all of that. And you're probably thinking, ooh. Now, if you were paying attention, which hopefully you were, I already know which one of you guys skips it in your reading. Just kidding. I'm joking. I said I wouldn't judge you, so I won't. But the first thing you notice if you're paying attention is how long they lived. People don't live that long. We know this. I mean, to most people who read this, they think, well, that's just a fairy tale. People don't live that long. And the funny thing about this is, in the context that the Bible was written, this actually isn't that long. There was a I guess it's called a stela, is I guess what it's called, but called the Sumerian's King List. I have a picture of it here on the screen. It's a very ancient text. And in that, it's funny because it talks about how kingship descended and all that. And we're going to read an excerpt for just a second. But it says that people lived a lot longer than what Genesis claimed. So I have here just one excerpt that I took, and this is from the very beginning of that tablet, or not, it's not really a tablet, it's square. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Elulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Now that 900 years isn't sounding so bad, is it? So in the context that the Bible was written, it's not saying that they lived that long. This is what the ancients were all talking about. So let's keep things in perspective. Elalgar ruled for 36,000 years. Just in case you thought 28,000 was a long time. 2 kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. A little bit of a big pill to swallow. Now, obviously, there's the slightest of chances that maybe there's translation errors in the Bible or whatever that we're just not understanding and we're not translating it right. That's always there. But we're going to assume for the day's argument that the numbers as we have them translated in our Bible is the correct translation, okay? We're just going to start there, and we'll leave the scholars for the arguments, okay? And with that, the thing that blows me away is people look and they say, people couldn't have possibly lived that long. This isn't the hardest thing to believe in the Bible. This is not the hardest thing to believe in the Bible. This is easy to believe. It says that God created everything from nothing. If you can believe that, then saying people lived 900 years isn't that big of a deal. It says that God became a person to die on our behalf, though we did nothing to deserve it. That's a lot harder to believe than people live 900 years. So let's keep things in perspective. If you're going to pick apart the miracles of the Bible, start with the biggest one. Okay? Jesus is fully God. That's the biggest, most outrageous claim of the Bible. And if you can stand on that, then all the other ones just aren't really that big of a deal. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you're going to read a lot of stuff from a lot of really smart people, and it's going to say about how the Bible is untrustworthy because of stuff like this. And all I'm saying is, as a Christian, we believe in the impossible. We believe in we're already there, okay? So don't let them persuade you against belief in God because of stuff like this. I mean, remember, we believe in the most outrageous thing, that God actually cares about us. I mean, that's a lot more important, too. So let's not get blindsided by all the different arguments from smart people. But I do want to say, with the whole living a long time thing, it's worth mentioning that most ancient cultures believed that people used to live a long time. This is not a new revelation from the Bible. The ancients already believed that. And it's funny because if you read the Sumerian king list, it's talking about all these thousands and thousands of years, and then it says, and then the flood hit. They reference the flood, and they reference in the same order that the Bible does. People lived a long time, and then there was a flood. And then people lived not as long. The Bible just tells us why. So keep things in perspective, that this isn't some outrageous thing that the Bible is just making stuff up. No, in the context of the ancient world, this is stuff that it all fits. So the Bible's genealogies are normally not complete. And what I mean to say that is they don't give us a full picture of every person who ever lived on the planet Earth. Sometimes they'll skip, and sometimes they'll do this thing where they'll say this person was the son of this person, but it wasn't actually their son, it was like their grandson or great-grandson. You see this in the book of Daniel is a great example of this. It'll say, this was his name, I think it was not Nabopolassar, but the other one. Whatever his name was the son of Nebuchadnezzar. Well, actually, no, he wasn't, but the word that we translate as son means descendant of. So keep in mind that the genealogies are not written to be a complete record of all human existence. They're written primarily to teach us something. And they oftentimes will skip around. And so for some people, they try to turn this into kind of a historical experiment, like how long has the earth been around? That's not really the idea here. And you can't really figure out the earth's age because it doesn't give us an exact count of every year from creation. Okay, so let's not... people have done that, and it really just exercise in futility, I guess. So the next thing that worth mentioning is that Enoch lived shorter than anyone else in this list. Everybody else is getting 900 years of life and 800 years, and then you get to him, and he just lives a mere 365 years. Now, that doesn't sound bad in comparison to us, but in comparison to all these other people, it's like, well, he got the short end of the stick, and God loved him, and he got the short end of the stick. But the thing is, serving God doesn't mean a long life. And the ironic thing here is that Enoch's son, Methuselah, lived longer than anybody else on the list. So you have the shortest person on the list right over the longest person on the list. And no matter how long you live, though, a big point of this genealogy here is that you die. No matter how long you live, you die. And you can live for any number of things. We're going to look at that in just a minute. But Enoch lived for God. And really, one of the big points of this genealogy is, where do you stand with God? It might seem like he lost because he didn't live as long as all these other people, but when you keep in mind that he didn't die because God took him, he won. His life was shorter than everybody else, but that only matters if this is all that there is. If it's not all that there is, well, that's not that big of a deal. So if you read through the genealogy, I'm sure you noticed, but I'll highlight it just in case you missed it. It specifically says of every other person in this list, and then he died. I have here a master list that just shows everybody with all the other stuff taken away. So Adam died, so Seth died, Enosh died, Kenan died, Mahalalel died, Jared died, Methuselah died, Lamech died. They all says that they died. This is the only genealogy in Genesis that says that. All the other genealogies of Genesis does not have that. It says, this person fathered this person, and sometimes they'll say, and they lived this long on the other ones. But this is the only one in Genesis that says, and then he died, and then he died, and then he died. And there's a reason why it's saying that. First off, it's saying that to draw more attention to Enoch. Enoch didn't die. He was taken by God. That's the first reason why it says that. The second reason why it does that is because it's connecting the account of the genealogy way back to the curse that was listed in chapter 3 of Genesis, which I'll have here on the screen. For you are dust, and you will return to dust. And so now it's going through, tells what happened with Cain and Abel. We'll get to that in just a second. And then it hops over to Cain's descendants. We'll get to that in just a second. And then it hops over here, and it shows that all of them died. Because what God said is going to happen is happening. People are seeking God. People are doing their own thing. But they're all dying. The thing that set Enoch aside was that he walked with God. And he did it for 300 years. So somewhere along the line, Enoch decided, I'm seeing all these people living and dying for nothing. They want to do life on their own terms. They want to do this and that. I'm just not seeing it. Instead, I'm going to live my life different. I'm going to walk with God. Somewhere along the line, he makes this conscious decision. So what happens between God's curse of Genesis 3 and the genealogy of Genesis 5? Well, I have here a little chart to help you kind of follow the flow of the argument. So the fall, where sin enters the world, that happens in chapter 3, verses 1 through 24. And then after that, you get to an interesting little story. The first family squabble. There's these 2 kids. It always is 2, huh? They tell you, I don't want to have 1 kid because I want my kid to have someone to play with, so we're going to have 2. You mean 2 to fight with, and then you think, I'll get 3, and then they'll take turns. No. One's always the oddball out, and then the other 2 fight, and the whole time you're just thinking, keep your hands to yourself and be quiet. Golly. Huh? What? Where are we? Okay, back to Genesis. So we have the first family squabble here. Adam and Eve, the first 2 people, have these 2 kids, Cain and Abel. And the way I always remember which one is which is Cain killed Abel with a cane. Yeah? See? It's a little helpful thing. Now, I don't know if he actually used a cane. I don't know. But it's helpful to remember. So Cain kills his brother Abel because he's jealous of him. And as a result, he gets cursed by God to wander. And you can read through the whole thing in chapter 4. Yeah, 4 I think is this. But I'm just going to skip through it. And so then he says this to God. After he just killed his brother, and so God tells him you have to wander now. He says this, my burden is too great. Dude, you just killed somebody. And you can't blame it on TV. You can't say the violence. I mean, the video games were too violent. You can't say any of that. It was just you and your brother out in the field, bro. It was you. And so God says, okay, all right. Because one part of Cain's problem is that people are going to find me, they're going to kill me. Man, oh man. Evidently, paranoia goes way back. I mean, remember, there aren't a whole lot of people around. Remember, God just created everybody. It hasn't been that long. And he's already worried about being hunted down like a dog. You got to wonder, man. He must have really had a guilty conscience. So he says, punishment's too great. People are going to find me and kill me. So then God says this to him. He says, then the Lord replied to him, in that case, whoever kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And he being God, placed a mark on Cain so that whoever found him would not kill him. Not that he really needed it. I mean, the Bible says very distinctly that God heard Abel's blood from the ground. So it's not like he lost track of Cain or something. But I guess he does it to give Cain peace of mind is my assumption, I guess. So you have the fall, Cain and Abel happening. And then what happens between Cain and Abel and the genealogy that we're looking at this morning? Well, there's another little thing that happens, and that's Cain's genealogy. And we're not going to read the whole thing, because we already went through 1. I'm not going to make you suffer through 2 in one morning. I'm not going to do that to you. But it says here throughout chapter 4, Cain was intimate with his wife, and she gave birth to Enoch. This is a different Enoch, same name though. Then Cain became the builder of a city, and he named the city Enoch after his son. Irad was born to Enoch. Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. Okay, all right. This sounds like more pointless lists until you get to this part. This is very important, because this is the bridge between the 2 genealogies. Lamech took 2 wives for himself, one named Adah and the other named Zillah. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, wives of Lamech, pay attention to my words. Which, let's just take a moment and realize how awkward it was to find a wife when everybody alive came from your mother and father. Yeah. Rough going. In fact, the law, and actually during the time of the law, they had to start putting things aside and saying, okay, you have to, don't get immediate family members to have families with. You need to go outside of the extended family a little bit. For I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is to be avenged 7 times over, then for Lamech it will be 77 times. Boy, oh boy, what arrogance. So we have the fall, Cain and Abel, Cain's genealogy, and then the genealogy that we're actually looking at. And let me just a second. And so one thing that we see in that genealogy that we just read, Cain's genealogy, is that Cain was told that he was cursed and he had to wander. But instead of wandering, he builds a city and sets up shop. Doesn't that strike anybody as odd? God tells him, okay, you will be driven from the ground. Go wander the earth. And Cain's like, okay, my punishment is too great. Okay, I'm going to go build a city over here. That's not wandering. I don't know who gave this guy a dictionary, but he needs an updated dictionary. This is not obeying. So Cain disobeys. He doesn't wander. And so he's keeping with his status of disobeying God. God's like, hey, I see that look in your eye. You're upset with your brother. You might want to cool it, dude. And he's like, oh, no, I got this. And he kills his brother anyway. God's like, okay, that's it. You need to get out of here. And he's like, well, that's a little bit too rough. He's like, okay, fine. I'll put a mark on you, but you still got to go. And so he says, okay, I hear what you're saying, but instead, I'm going to do this instead. Okay, so you can kind of see the pattern here. And that leads us to a very interesting contrast that is happening all throughout chapter 5 and Cain's genealogy. The two genealogies are what's called a contrast in the Bible. That's where two different characters are put up against each other. The two characters that are put up against each other is Lamech from Cain's line and Enoch from Seth's line. Okay, and so let me kind of show you how this is so. The first is that they're both the 7th in the line. The line listed, they're both the 7th. I have here the breakdown of the line. I'm sorry, go to the next slide there. Breakdown of the line. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, 7. Adam, Cain, Enoch, Irad, Mehujael, Methushael, Lamech, 7. So this is the first way it's showing of contrasting the two characters. They're both the same number in the line. If you read through, which you did, Seth's line, it gave us 10 people. 10 in the Bible is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes a sign of completeness. So once again, this isn't the genealogy isn't meant to be a complete list. It's just meant to show the completeness of this list, which is filled with righteous people, as contrasted with Cain's line, which only has 8 people. And in Cain's line, you see those 8 people, well, not all of them, but you see some of them doing some wicked things. And in Seth's line, you see multiple people doing righteous things. So Lamech's line, if you notice, it had no years, and it ends abruptly. No years are listed for any of Cain's kids. It doesn't say they lived this long or that long. It doesn't say. Who knows? Maybe they were all dying in their 30s and 40s. We don't know. It doesn't tell us. But either way, it doesn't give Lamech's lines any years. And then it ends abruptly. And the reason for this is shown because they died in the flood. It was Seth's line that was saved through the flood. So once again, showing the righteous versus the wicked. Then we get to the names of the different people. This is kind of funny. It's humorous. Lamech is a name that means strong. Lamech is a name that means strong. And for all intents and purposes, we have the perfect toxic masculinity here. He is strong, I guess you could say that, in earthly standards. He has zero respect for God, but he's strong in earthly perspective. He's surrounded by the ladies. You know, he's accomplishing all this stuff. He takes vengeance on the great and the small. Oh, look at him. He's so great. Meanwhile, Enoch, it doesn't say any of that about Lamech. I'm sorry, about Enoch. So you have the contrast here of the names. What does Enoch mean? Enoch means dedicated or disciplined. Enoch was dedicated to God. He was disciplined in that he was disciplined in his service to God. The thing that the trait that we need to carry with us through this year is discipline. Discipline, dedication to the Lord. No matter what, we're in it for the long haul. We're not going to leave the church if we get our feelings hurt. We're not going to leave the faith if we get our feelings hurt. We're going to stay dedicated to God. We're going to stay disciplined to God, right? And when I say leave the church, I'm talking about leave Christianity. I'm not talking about this, although I would recommend strongly not church hopping, going from place to place with a nasty attitude, because you're going to take you with you. So there's that. Most of the time when I've dealt with people who, they get their feelings hurt, so they just stop going to church. I'm done. I'm not going to church anymore. What you find is they are inevitably irritated a couple weeks later. Why? Because you take you with you wherever you go. Some people try to move. I've got a crappy attitude, so I'm going to move to California. Okay? Yeah, not me. Get back. But and then it doesn't work because you take you with you. You have to change you. And that's one of the foundational things of the Bible. So Cain tries to move on, right? And he tries to do it with discipline. We're going to just power our way through this. We might have been cast out by God, but we're going to just power through. So he names his son Enoch, which means discipline. And then he builds Enoch a city named Enoch, which means discipline. So you can see Cain trying to double down, like we're just going to power our way through this. And then you see Seth not even taking up this attempt at, doing life on his own terms. But the problem with Cain's approach is that there was no discipline to God. They were just trying to power through it. So Enoch, on the other hand, was known for being dedicated to God. He was known for being disciplined to God. He was known, the one thing it says about Enoch, he walked with God. He says it twice, just in case you missed it the first time. If you were reduced to one line of the Bible, one line, you are in the Bible and it says one thing about you, what would it be? What would you be known for? For Lamech, we see what he was known for. But then it gets to Enoch, and we see what Enoch's known for, walking with God. The one thing it has to say about him, and Enoch walked with God. So what was Lamech known for? Well, let's read through this real quick, okay? Enoch walked with God 300 years and fathered other sons and daughters. So Enoch's life lasted 365 years. Enoch walked with God. Then he was not there because God took him. So you get to Lamech, and what's Lamech's legacy? What is he known for? 3 things. Lamech is known for 3 things. The first thing that he's known for is polygamy. In a time when people did not have a bunch of wives, Lamech is the very first person to take more than one wife. And it's not out of necessity. They're living a long time. See, it made sense in one period of history for people to marry young and have a bunch of wives and all that, because they weren't living real long. They were dying in their 30s and their 40s. You need to hurry up and get it going so you can pop out some kids before you die. That made sense. But that's not the case here. These people are living hundreds of years. They don't need to hurry up and get the train rolling. So you have Lamech, the first polygamist, without a cause. So we see it sets him up as a man given to lust and passion. So then the second thing that he's known for, being unjust. It says here, let's see if I can flip to it. I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. It doesn't say for trying to kill me. I killed them because they acted against me. I think that would be called overkill, a little vengeful, harsh maybe even. And so you see him rejecting God's standards over and over again, just like his father Cain did. Do not murder. I'm going to murder someone if they do the slightest offense to me. I'm going to gossip about this person if they do the slightest offense to me. They better not. And then the third thing that you see Lamech known for, Lamech's legacy, is what we're calling it here, is he was a respecter of none. It said that Cain would be avenged by God if anybody killed him. That wasn't good enough for Lamech. Lamech took it into his own hands. And instead of saying, hey, God will defend me, no, he says, forget that. I will defend me. And then he says he's not just going to do it, he's going to do it 77 times. That's a little overkill. You can see him mocking God. Well, Cain might have been protected by God about the whole 7 times, but I'm bigger and better than that. So he's neither afraid of man, he's not afraid of God. Very pleasure-driven. We could summarize all of Lamech by just simply saying he was a pleasure-driven man. So we have Enoch, which is shown as a man who walked with God, and then you have Lamech, who's very pleasure-driven. Okay, but it doesn't end there, so let's keep going. Lamech took 2 wives Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, wives of Lamech, pay attention to my words. For I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is to be avenged 7 times over, then for Lamech it will be 77 times. Now, if you've been paying attention when I just read it, I've read it a couple times now, doesn't that sound a little bit familiar? Can anybody tell me where you've heard that before? Anybody? What? Yes. Jesus references this story in Matthew chapter 18. This is what Jesus said. Peter asked, Lord, how many times must I forgive? As many as 7 times? I tell you, not as many as 7, Jesus replied, but 77 times. Now, some translations will read 70 times 7. It really could be translated either, but from my own personal translation and the context, I think this one's right, but you can disagree with me, that's fine. Either way, Lamech indulged in all the things sin tells us are good. He indulged in sex. He indulged in power. He indulged in self-worship. Look at how great I am. I'm going to prepare myself. You can just, defend myself, and you can see him just sitting there with his 2 wives. Let me tell you 2 ladies what's up. He's sitting there bragging to his wives. Like, can you imagine the arrogance of this man? He's just sitting there. Come here, wife number 1 and wife number 2. Let me tell you about how cool I am. Like, first off, can't we say that's a little bit like a man, right? I need to tell you how awesome I am. But that beside the point. You know, here he is, Lamech is indulging in all the things that sin tells us are just so great. So Enoch, though, he's disciplined to God. Lamech, undisciplined. Strength is all that there is to this man. He's for himself. And you could even say it like this. You could say it like this if you wanted to. You could say that both Enoch and Lamech were dedicated, but they were dedicated to different things. Enoch was dedicated to God, whereas Lamech was dedicated to self. And so Cain's evil spiraled to his children. He couldn't get his attitude in control with his brother, so he killed him. So then he goes out and disobeys God and builds a city. So then he hands down this legacy to his children, which climaxes with Lamech of evil. This is the thing that he has handed down to his children. Meanwhile, Seth's family is called to God, right? Completely set apart to God. And in fact, it's obviously, since they're the only ones left alive, it's the family line that Abraham and Moses would eventually come through. So Seth's family, the righteousness there, that spiraled down to Enoch. And then later on, you get Noah in the story too. See, because Seth chose a different route than Cain did. And it went down to their kids. And oh, what chances we have to impact our kids. Oh, what impact. See, our kids watch us, and they want to know, are you going to live what you preach? Is God and the church, is that a priority for you? Are you going to read the Bible, or are you going to obey the Bible? When you deal with people who hurt your feelings, how are you going to deal with it? How are you going to deal with it? They want to know what's going on there. Unfortunately, a lot of our kids have seen us gossip about people in the church because we didn't like them. So I'm just going to talk bad about them. Unfortunately, some of our kids have seen us leave from church to church, go from church to church to church throughout our years because we can't get along with people. You see these patterns develop, and unfortunately what we do is we kind of look at it as though we're the center of our story. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine that, I was right in the end. But instead, our kids are the ones who are going to take up the mantle after us. I was reading a story one time, and it was talking about this pastor. He was really burned out from ministry, and his kid said, actually, I met the man. His name was Wes Beavis. He's a counselor now. But he was from Australia. I remember that because he talked, like an Aussie. And so he's like, he gets up on the stage and says, I'm from South, far South. I was like, this guy's an Aussie. But anyways, and he was telling the story of, when he was in ministry, he got in this first church, and everything went easy. Everything was just super easy. It grew without him even having to try. And so he got this the sense of accomplishment, which is exactly what God does with our kids. Our first kid is always easiest, and then we get lulled into comfort when we say, "Hi, I'm a good parent." And then number 2 comes along, and they smack you on the back of the head so fast and so hard you fall on your face. Sometimes literally, huh? But so he's talking to his kid, and his kid says, "Dad, I want to be a pastor." And his heart sinks. He says, "No, you don't. You don't, though. How about you do something else?" Why? Because he'd been burned. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to finish up the story. Then he went to another church, and everything blew up in his face, like thing after thing after thing. So now it kind of makes sense. He didn't want his kid to follow in the steps because it was just too hard. And sometimes we do the same thing, like, hey, church people are going to hurt you worse than regular people, so just stay out of church. And that's not really the idea to get along, but it's just the way that things hand down to our kids. Your kids see you obey God or disobey God, make them a priority or not. And that's definitely the case for both Seth and Enoch. So another thing we see about Enoch, well, before I move on, I want to read Genesis 4. This is one tiny half of a verse that is in between the 2 genealogies. It says this: "At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord." Very important, because while Cain is getting more and more wicked, and so is a lot of the people, Seth's family is starting to call out to God. So another thing we see contrasted between the two is that Enoch, not a single word of Enoch is recorded. Enoch is silent. Lamech talks, and boy does he talk. He has a whole poem that he recites to his wives. But it's not good. What he says is not good. And typically, I've lived by this my whole life. Typically, if your mouth is always open, it's just a matter of time before something stupid comes out. Have you found that to be true in your life? Because I found it to be true in my life. If you keep your mouth open, it's just a matter of time. But if you can master the art of closing your mouth, it goes a lot better than it would have otherwise. So Enoch is silent. Lamech talks. And Enoch isn't just silent. He's silent before God. He's walking with God. Not talking, just walking with God. Lamech, on the other hand, what he has to say very boldly. Let me tell you about what I'm going to do to somebody who wrongs me. He boldly declares his sin to his wives. I remember when I was a kid, I had this pastor, and he actually was the first pastor I had that wasn't my dad. He always said this: whenever you graduate, he would give you a Bible, and he would put the beginning of it, the same thing in every single Bible. Sin will keep you from this book, or this book will keep you from sin. And I found the exact same thing is true of God. Sin keeps you from God, or God keeps you from sin. To try and get out of sin without getting closer to God is a fruitless effort. I've seen a lot of drug addicts get out of drugs and say this: I don't need God, I'm out of drugs. You don't get God so you get out of drugs. You need God. And you also need to stop doing drugs. But you need God. That's why you get God, is because you need God. And it's like whenever people talk about tithing, they always say it doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? You're honoring God with your finances. That's it. It works if you're honoring God. Then it works. It's not something that's a pattern, or that's a, So real briefly, I want to mention that typically there's going to be 3 stages of sin in your life. The first stage is you're going to have a fight with your conscience. You know something's wrong, but you really, really, really want to do it. The second step is you're going to try to justify it. Because you really, really, really want to do it and you don't want to stop doing it, you're going to try to justify yourself to others or to yourself, whatever. And then you get to the third step, which is living boldly in sin. This is where you say, no, I'm not leaving this sin. God accepts me as I am. That means I don't have to change, right? If God really loves me, then he'll accept me for who he's made me, which means I can live in sin and it's totally fine. And it sounds reasonable at the surface of it, but we kind of get ourselves in these little chains. We get ourselves stuck. And that's exactly where we find Lamech. And the thing is, in my entire years of ministry, over 17 years, I have never once seen somebody progress into sin outside of this pattern. This is how it always happens. Always. God has given you a conscience, and when you get saved, he renews your conscience. So let's get to the last things here and wrap things up. Lamech's heart was proud, and I think that would be the summary of all of Lamech. His heart was proud. And then Enoch, his heart was dedicated. So I think that's a good way to summarize the two accounts. And we see them laid out back to back because God wants to do something, but people keep getting in the way. He makes the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve get in the way. He tries to just lead them on their own to live a good life. Cain and Abel get in the way. He tries to just, let them come to him and okay, you guys are seeking me. You guys can still make this work and everything. I'm going to be patient with you. And then they just keep getting into sin. He's like, okay, fine. You're all are grounded. I'm drowning you all. Except for you, Noah. You're okay. And so next week, we're going to look at the trait of generosity from Abraham. But what can we take away from this genealogy? What can we really look at this and say, how did this apply to us? And I think there's three things. The first thing that I think this genealogy can teach us is to live your life intentionally. Live your life intentionally. Loving God, loving people, serving God and people, that's not natural. Naturally, we serve ourselves. Naturally, we watch out for number one. That's our go-to setting, ourselves. Serving God, it's natural to serve and worship, but we like to put it on ourselves instead. It's not something that comes natural. You have to work at it. If you want to love Roswell, you have to work at it. It's not going to come naturally. There's going to be people in Roswell that really irritate you. There's going to be people who are high-handed atheists, and they're proud of it too. They're going to get up all in your face, and they're going to just rub you wrong all over. Loving people is when you find people who you don't want to love, and you learn to love them. That's loving. Serving is when you go to the people who don't like you, and you serve them anyways. And we see that model with Jesus. He comes to a world that didn't ask for him and then dies for them when they thought they were doing fine. It's natural not to grow. It's natural to gossip. It's natural to close your ears and say, no, I don't need to grow. I don't need to learn. It's natural to think that you got it figured out. It's natural to be prideful. Although I will say, it's easier for me to admit that I'm wrong now as a 30-year-old than it was when I was 16. When I was 16, I knew everything. Nobody could tell me I had all the world's problems figured out. I knew what my mom and dad did wrong. I knew what my siblings did wrong. I knew what everybody had done wrong. And it's a lot different this side of 16 for you young folks. It's a lot different. Hold on till you get out of your 20s and then keep holding on. But those things are natural for us. It's hard to walk with God. It's something you have to do intentionally. We always tell ourselves, when I have more time or when I'm older. And then we get older, we have more time, and we still don't make time for that. It's funny, I knew one person who kept saying, I'll make time for you later, God, I'll make time for you. They ended up being hospitalized for 4 months. And they had all the time in the world. Guess who read through the Bible? There was another guy, he was an ex-druggie, but he always would tell God later, and then he got arrested, incarcerated. I think it was a number of years, I don't remember how long. Maybe like 8. And when he had been there for a while, he said that he felt like God told him, do I have your attention yet? So he ended up reading through the Bible there because he had nothing else to do. And we always had these excuses. But today, now, this year, this is the time to be dedicated to God, to be dedicated to Roswell. It's now. It's now. The second thing is, our dedication to God is shown by our life. If you want to know who and what you're really dedicated to, take a look at your life. Are you ruled by pleasure? Are you a divisive person? Are you a gossip? How do you manage your finances? Are you always in debt? Are you always spending money on things that you don't need? Your finances have a very annoying way of revealing what your priorities really are. I read, I think it was John Maxwell, he says, you make time for what's important to you, and you make excuses for what's not important to you. What are you making for excuses for in your life? How do you make excuses for not spending time with your kids, for not getting out of debt, for not reading the Bible? What's important to you? What are you making excuses for? It's easy to be hateful to sinners. It's easy to be hateful to other Christians in the community. Yeah, it's really easy. I was at a church one time, and we hosted this event. We didn't do it. We hosted this event. And for this event that we hosted, they had a guy that dressed up as Santa, and he came to the church as Santa. And we had so many kids. We had, by our count, it was more kids than were actually in the village and in the village next to us, which means they had to have come from somewhere. They didn't just fall out of the sky. So that means they were coming from the city next to us, the village we lived in, and the village next to us, all three. We had so many kids, they were leaking out of the walls. And afterwards, I was talking to somebody that said, I can't believe you had Santa inside the house of God. I was like, whoa, pause. Do you know how many kids we just impacted? Do you know how many kids we just presented with an open door and showed them that church isn't something to run away from? That people here do love and care about you? Like, that preaches a lot more than words. And they completely missed that because there was a Santa in the building. Now, I'm open with my kids. If you don't know yet, Santa's not real. Sorry. Spoiler alert, you were going to find out eventually anyways. I'm always open with my kids. I say, hey, no, that's not a thing. I get the presents for you. If you want to say thank you, it's me. And you need to tell me. We don't even have a fireplace. But, I mean, if you want to do that, that's your own decision. My point being, I'm not one of these, you have to make Christmas special by including Santa. I'm not one of these people. But if there's an open door to reach that many kids, take it. Take it and don't stop to ask questions. Take it. Like, when you can impact that many kids, get out there, do it. The third way I think that this really applies to us is victory comes in time. Victory comes in time. It's not going to be something that you get victory of that right now. It comes in time. When we look at the genealogies, this is what we see. We see a lot of people living a long time. So Seth's righteousness eventually impacted his kids, but it took time. It took time. Enoch lived 300 years walking with God before he saw the fruit of that. And then eventually Noah came. When there's reason to not be dedicated, that's when we need to be dedicated. And Enoch lived in a very evil time. Very evil time. And he was dedicated to God. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I just want to summarize this for the kids. Okay, guys, remember this, kids. Don't go back there till after we're done with prayer. I'm eyeballing you. This is what I want to summarize here. God honors putting him first. God honors dedication. When you make time for God, he'll honor you for that. Lord, I pray that you'd bless those who are here, that this year would be dedicated to you. Lord, that you would have your way in this year and all of us. That no matter what level of growth we are at with you, that we would become dedicated, that we would be known for walking with you. Lord, I pray you would bless this year and guide it and direct it, that you would bring healing and health, success, and unity, Lord. We thank you for all that you're doing.